So we have Chaz. This is a speaker now. Chaz, you there, buddy?
Hey Ali, how you doing, man?
Not hearing Chaz. Switching to my headphones. Gonna also bring Ali on.
Yeah, busy
Ali
week, lots of stuff going on, but
should be on now.
all positive things. Really excited, a lot of good lightning updates. We can get
Hi
into that.
guys. Hi Evan, Chaz, Justifer,
Yeah, let's see if we can
Hey
Ali here.
Ali, how you doing, man?
Doing great. How has everybody been? Had a good week, I hope.
Yeah, busy week. Lots of stuff going on, but all positive things. Really excited. A lot of good lightning updates. We could get into them.
Great, great.
Yeah, let's see if we could get Chaz in on the mix. Chaz, buddy, you there?
Yeah, I'm having some bugs here with Twitter Spaces, so I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. You don't have to apologize. It's the engineer's fault. So hopefully Jack swings by and we could give him an earful. No,
Right.
just kidding. I said I'd take it easy if he popped in here. Yeah, let's bring a couple more people on stage and we could get rolling with some stuff. We got Pierre. Pierre's here. Pierre works at Kraken on the Bitcoin infrastructure team with me. That'd be dope to have him on board. We also got Paul Miller. He's working over at Voltage, as well as Alyssa from Voltage. She's in the group too. Anyone who wants to join on stage with us? I think we're just going to, start talking about any updates from the week. I think there's a couple of really cool ones. Then we could just start taking general questions from anyone, maybe people who have not used Lightning before or have questions about getting set up and using their own node. Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on right now. This week, I think my favorite news is the new LND release, which has got like so many incredible features that are sort of understated. Yeah, first and foremost, it's got atomic multipath payments and regular multipath payments on by default. And I think this is going to be a really big help to the network because the biggest issue is like finding routes to make your payment complete. And now that the route finding is automatically accounting for 16 different combinations, and you don't have to just go one path to make a payment, it's going to make things complete much, much more easily. So that's feature number one I'm really pumped about. They've also got a whole bunch of other things in there. Let's see if we can pull up the release notes. One of the other things is that they're starting to build in some redundancies. So this is going to be a really big feature for enterprises. I'm definitely checking this out for our integration at Kraken. So that's going to be fun to get into the weeds of. I know, namely, a big problem with a lot of people running LND on their pre-built node solutions was the memory usage was really high. It sounds like they've tackled that. I haven't done any benchmarks, but that'll be really good. I think we're going to get a lot of better performance for people running LND on a Raspberry Pi that only has like 2 to 4 gigs of RAM. I think the 8 gigabyte Pi users shouldn't be affected as much. What other big notes were in here? Oh, anchor output channels. Huge upgrade to the protocol. So anchor output channels, in a nutshell, are going to help in cases where people need to close channels when they're dealing with parties that are being dishonest. And basically, you're putting aside some funds to help with those channel closes. This is going to help out with all the griefing attacks that are not super common, but can be a pain point, especially for big operators. So I'm really stoked to see that. There's also a bunch of peer-to-peer gossip network handling improvements, which are really cool. There's some stuff on spontaneous payments. There's AMP invoices, which I haven't dived into, but really excited to mess around with and figure out what that's all about. Oh, yeah, and then another really cool one that's under the radar is how the coin selection is being done now. So if you're not doing coin selection by default, the coins that were selected from your UTXOs were being selected deterministically, And this would result in the wallet having a whole bunch of like small UTXOs that were pretty much dust. They're uneconomical. And now it's going to be selected randomly, so you should have a better selection of coins over time if you're not, really picking your UTXOs manually. So like these are all great improvements. The end user might not see like a whole bunch of flashy new features, but these are really great core enhancements that I think are going to be great. Really excited to mess around with this release, and I just want to say shout out to the Lightning Labs team that's working really diligently, really pushing the envelope on new features, and providing a great piece of software that I think a lot of us rely on. So shout out to them.
So Evan, would you mind if I brought you back really fast to one part in here really fast that I found pretty interesting?
Yeah, sure thing, Chaz. I think a lot of these things are really heady and can be confusing to people. So I'd be happy to try to go into detail as much as I can on any of those.
So on the anchor output channels, something that I found really interesting that you mentioned kind of really briefly, because you're just kind of going through it on a high level here. But something I found really interesting was the fact that, the anchor outputs are going to potentially help with that kind of flood and loot kind of griefing attack stuff that we've heard about, like people like to concentrate on for some reason. But could you go ahead and explain how that would work? Maybe not, too technically, but just generally.
Yeah, so let's say you're a dishonest actor, right? So first things first is this is like a difficult and risky attack to pull off, but when we're dealing with people's money, it's really good to like get into the specifics and make sure that we cover all the edge cases. So like an attack like this, you basically need to have like both incoming and outgoing liquidity from a node. You got to be on both sides of it. And basically, when you're making payments or receiving payments, you're not passing a pre-image back to say that you received it. And then you could also like broadcast that you like a false state. And basically, when someone is trying to like call you out on your shenanigans, they got to be able to like close the channel and say, okay, this is the real state. This person has been lying to me, right? Or they're providing false statuses on our network. And I want to call them out on their BS, and I want to claim the whole pool because when you do a justice transaction, the other person like forfeits all their funds on the channel. And this is the incentive like to not cheat. If you cheat, you could potentially lose the whole channel. So I think it's a really interesting potential, incentive. But anyway, the crux of it is if you have this channel, right, and the balance is all on the attacker's side, you don't have any funds left over to close out the channel, especially when you're in a high fee environment. So the idea is that with these anchor channels, you have another UTXO of funds that are just used for the fee for closing the channel. And this way you can always close out your channel and you don't have to worry about the attacker beating you to the channel close with your false with their false state. So basically this is going to help keep everyone honest. It's going to help deter cheaters from trying to pull off these griefing attacks. And I think all in all, this gives both users and enterprises like some good assurances that even if they're dealing with nefarious actors, they'll be able to mitigate their attacks really easily now. So this is a really exciting one. And I believe they're on by default in LND 0.13. Admittedly, I have not been using their release client track, so I'm just going to be getting my hands dirty with those channels this week. So that'll be a lot of fun to mess around with. Really, really excited about that. Anything that helps the security of the network is a huge win in my book.
So, like with these anchor outputs, does that mean that there's no longer going to be a commit fee that is like locking up some of the liquidity in the channel?
From my understanding, you don't have to commit it on the actual channel funds if you have this other UTXO accounting for it. So I think you need like a certain threshold of coins. Like it can't just be like a small amount. You got to have like, I don't know. Lop was saying you need something like 100,000 sats to make sure you could cover the network fee, and you should be good. But you don't really need that for all your channels, presuming you're not getting attacked all the time. I think that should cover a couple of closeouts actually. So yeah, basically, as long as you have some decent amount of funds in your on-chain wallet, you should be good to go. So I need to mess around with it firsthand. I'm just going off of what I've heard and my understanding of it. But yeah, I think that's the case.
That's awesome because at least for folks just starting in Lightning, I think that commit fee is really confusing for most people because they'll open like a 1,000,000 sat channel and then they'll be wondering why, like, oh, like I can't use all of this liquidity to make a payment because, like, oh, there's this commit fee. Or I think they mostly notice it when they make really tiny channels that this thing is kind of blocking the way.
Yeah, it's like not the big users that have tons of funds that it's all fluctuating. It's just like people who have like only one or two, and they're like, hell, what's going on? Why is my balance going down over time? And they don't realize that the channel balances on Lightning are accounting for the on-chain fees in order to make that channel close. So yeah, we're going to report back next week. Hopefully we make this a recurring thing. We make it Lightning Friday, and we can all report back and see what our experience is. But yeah, I think this should help with that. And yeah, I know firsthand a lot of users for Zeus. Heads out to anyone who doesn't know, I have this open source Lightning wallet called Zeus. It's mostly dedicated it's catered to people who run their own full nodes at home. And that's been a question I've gotten asked a whole bunch over the last couple of years. And yeah, it's definitely a point of confusion. It's not like really clear to someone who doesn't understand the protocol. And yeah, if that point could be cleared up and end users don't have this extra bit of understanding to require some assurances of that balance staying steady, I think that'd go a long way too. So yeah, let's try it out this week and see what we find out.
I think Neutrino has got some enhancements as well, isn't it? From the newsletter earlier, I remember that there were going to be some memory related. I think the memory footprint was going to be reduced, and there was going to be an update to header filters as well as the configuration. So do you have any idea how the configuration is going to change how we use Neutrino, or what do the configuration changes enable us to do?
So let's rewind real quick. So Ali, you want to tell everyone what Neutrino is and what it really enables for Wallace?
Oh, sure. So Neutrino is, I think, if you want to simply, imagine what it is nothing but a Lightning node, just like LND. But the beauty is it allows you to have a LND Lightning node functionality with a very small footprint on a lightweight device like a mobile phone. And what it does, how it enables this is it does not sync all the blocks that are produced. What it does is it connects to a remote Bitcoin node, and it is able to filter out only the blocks that have a transaction of interest for the user, and gets only those blocks. Has the ability to get only those blocks. Thereby, it reduces the bandwidth, it reduces the memory uses, and it requires very less processing power. So it is a great tool for lightweight clients, especially mobile wallets. I think most of the target users mobile devices. So it's a great sort of a tool for that. So that's what Neutrino is. I hope I was able to elaborate correctly.
Yeah, that was great. Neutrino is very exciting. I think the main takeaway we can take from this is that it's going to be less memory intensive on people's phones. So this will mean that we'll get better performance on people's phones. This will mean that people with less state-of-the-art smartphones will be able to run Neutrino clients in a smooth manner. And it's like one great piece of the puzzle, Neutrino, to help people who perhaps don't have a full node back at home to be able to connect to someone else's node to get the blocks and run the Lightning logic and clients locally on their phone. So not everyone is going to be able to have their own Raspberry Pi or computer back home to connect to. So the more accessibility options that we have for users, the more people are going to be onboarding. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out in, say, economies like El Salvador, where people might not have all that much money, and their only options are like, okay, just go with the custodial wallet that someone like Bitcoin Beach or maybe the government is providing, or like a sort of KYC option in Strike, or just try to run the client on the smartphone that they have in their pocket. So this is great reason to be excited about things like Neutrino and the optimizations that the L&D team are working hard on, and also on implementations like LDK, the Rust Lightning project, which lets you sort of pull together all these different pieces, and you could use you could create implementations on all sorts of platforms, including mobile. Sorry, Elliot, what were you saying?
No, I just got a call, so I muted.
Yeah, no worries.
Apologies. Now, so I think Neutrino is great. I think it's going to open up a lot of different applications and use cases as we go along. And it's actually an implementation of BIP 157. If anyone is interested in the details of how the filtration happens, I think it's 157 and 158, if I'm not mistaken. That's the BIP for the technical details of how it's done.
Cool. So I think it seems like 157 is for the headers, and 158 is like for flexible filters for those who care.
Yeah. So in this particular release, 0.13, I think they've improved the filtration. So the touch points for the filters have been improved. So that makes the filtration much more efficient. And I think the memory footprint has been reduced as well substantially. So these two improvements are there, and there are quite a few other configuration-related changes, which I'm not really familiar with how they're going to impact the actual usage. So I'm looking forward to trying these. So I'm going to focus on the Neutrino experimentation a bit now that 1.3 is out.
Sweet, awesome. Yeah, I'm really pumped for that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Keegan.
I just had a question, really. If anybody is familiar with the trust assumptions or the trust differences between Neutrino and Bitcoin D, my naive interpretation here is that it basically is similar to SPV, where you're kind of validating proof of work and you're validating the block integrity itself when you go fetch these blocks from remote clients, but you're not actually validating every transaction from Genesis. Is that right?
Yeah, there's some trusted setup required, so you're obviously going to always be better off having your own node, whether it be like pruned or full node that you control yourself. So, but I think when you're actually pulling the blocks themselves, I think you have some more assurances. I'm not really sure about all the ins and outs, but if you're interested, you could always check out BIP 158.
Yeah, what I can add over there is there's definitely an element of trust because there is. So if you're using a common node with Uncle Jim or a community node, let's say, then the node owner or operator has access to your IP address if you don't use Tor. So using Neutrino eliminates that slightly. So it increases privacy in that area. So the node operator would come to know that this particular block has got a transaction related to you, but there are so many transaction addresses in that block. It doesn't really dilute your privacy that much. However, you need to trust the node that they'll give you the right block with the right data. So you're trusting them to give you the right block.
Well, sort of, right? You're still validating the proof of work, right?
Yeah.
because the thing that kind of jumped out at me at first as I was thinking through this is like, okay, well, what happens if your peers start giving you kind of bad blocks that don't have, maybe transactions that you care about? Maybe someone is broadcasting previous state and you need to be able to publish the revocation key in order to punish your peers. So, but
Yeah.
it occurred to me that it doesn't require much computational power to validate the structural integrity of the block itself, including the proof of work. So that at least massively increases the costs of trying to defraud a counterparty in that way.
Absolutely, yes.
All right. Yeah, so L&D, great release. Really excited to mess around with it this week. Did anyone else have anything that they want to talk about as far as new releases or new news on the Lightning Network? I think another item that was interesting to me, but I didn't really get to look into the details of, was that Zebedee, the gaming company on Lightning, announced a partnership with Bitstamp. Did anyone know or the details of that or get to see that this week? I thought that was intriguing because I don't think that Bitstamp has implemented Lightning yet, but this might open a path for them to. Anyone else see that?
So if I could just jump in here, like I guess I don't know too much about the specifics over there, but I think it brings up a kind of general question because you guys, being from Kraken and all, I think could kind of understand this perspective of, you're an exchange, right? You could be an exchange that has just Bitcoin, or you could be an exchange that has, more than Bitcoin. And you could be in the mentality of, well, if we're going to add Lightning, it better be profitable or whatever. But, if there's a way to kind of offload that to some other company that's already handling that, I would assume most exchanges, that aren't, super dedicated to, self-hosted security, maybe like Kraken is, would want to do something like that. So could anyone that's kind of here give me some thoughts on maybe, give everyone some thoughts on how, like, that thought process maybe on, would it be a good idea to bring this in-house and kind of do all the work, or would it be a good idea to find a partner to handle, the Lightning backend, maybe have Voltage or, what have you?
Yeah, I could talk about that a little bit. So right now we've seen a whole bunch of, or a good chunk of exchanges start to implement it. So we've seen like Bitfinex, they have one, and OKCoin. And the biggest thing I would say is that when you're dealing with a really large customer base and you're dealing with like these flows, I mean, it helps having those flows in both directions, both withdrawals and deposits, but nonetheless, you're still going to have to manage liquidity. And this is a challenge because other gateways on the site, like say like other assets, altcoins and Bitcoin on chain, like they don't really have the challenge of managing channels, managing liquidity, and I think more importantly, having a hot wallet. Like that's one of the biggest challenges of Lightning. You have this multi-sig hot wallet. Well, it's not really multi-sig. It's just like 6 different wallets. But basically, you have a different security model, and you also have this challenge of dealing with the liquidity. So I think a lot of smaller entities might not want to put in the manpower to A, manage the liquidity, B, put the security protocols in place, and actively be managing their channels like that. So I think we're going to see a lot more cases where people who specialize in it will be taking over those roles, and exchanges who just want to offer Lightning but not worry about the headache, they'll be making arrangements like that. So I definitely think you're on the right track there. I think that's going to be very common. So
I do expect that any sort of relationships like that do materialize are going to be like, there's going to require a significant amount of due diligence, though. Being a hot wallet, outsourcing the problem doesn't make the problem of hot wallets go away. All it does is defers it to a counterparty. And some exchanges may wish to do that, but between the regulatory hurdles that some of those companies might have to overcome to even just get into a position like that, in addition to the trust that they would have to earn in order to be able to manage, millions to hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital for another organization that is essentially a bearer asset. Like, I don't know how long it's going to take for those types of companies to be well enough established that we'll see them deployed at scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up a good point there. It definitely doesn't get rid of the risk, but as for someone who's coming from cybersecurity background, I noticed like one of the trends was bringing in a third-party vendor. May not have de-risked everything, but you could at least go and blame someone if something goes butt up, and it helps with operational risk and responsibilities. So like if your hot wallet gets hacked, you could always say, okay, it wasn't us, it was our third-party vendor, and usually you have some assurances in place there. You'll often have a insurance set up to some extent. And, ultimately, you can go to another vendor to help provide the service for you without burning your rep entirely. So, it's not without its risks, of course, but I could definitely see a lot of people doing this just to shift blame. So, yeah, we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. As you guys know, we're still really early days, and this all like stuff like anchor channels was sort of obvious in hindsight, but it's just coming out in releases now. So it's going to be really interesting in the next couple of years in the space as everything's being built up. I think it's going to be very rapid. I think we're going to see, a lot of the entities we see now in the space might not be around in, say, even 6 months. And, new major players can pop up in the same regard as well. So, things are going to get really crazy, and it's really exciting to be right here, right now, and be able to see how it all plays out.
Oh, totally. To Keegan's point about kind of outsourcing some of that activity, I kind of look at it thinking that there's going to be a spectrum of trust, because like already there's some major benefits to actually being able to trust your counterparties. Of course, that doesn't like eliminate any of that risk, but it does allow for lots of efficiencies. Like voltage, for one example, might help you with the hardware and actually like deploying let's say a cloud-based node that could manage that, at least the node part of it for you. But the liquidity part is definitely difficult, and you could even have an in-house person with the keys to the node that might be able to steal funds.
I was going to say
that could be a contractor.
Yeah, access control features in the main node implementations are something that's distinctly lacking right now, which, I mean, it's kind of to be expected, right? Like, that stuff is pretty complicated. Many IT, or like there are entire companies built off of just trying to manage personnel access control within corporate environments. And so to expect the node implementations to have that natively already is kind of ridiculous. But I do think that it's something that's strictly necessary for any sort of corporate environment in the not too distant future. But the other, like the real concern that I have with kind of outsourcing it to third parties is that while it might appear to reduce risk, I wonder how much it ends up just burying the risk in the tails. Like, I kind of lament the day where like there's a sort of Mt. Gox sized Lightning service provider for like a lot of exchanges, and like they get hacked and like everybody's funds go down instead of just the one exchange's.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I think, whereas if you're like a bigger entity and you're managing it yourself, your Lightning wallet really shouldn't be super big compared to what your on-chain holdings are, and you should be able to just cover the risk. But, if one of these providers ends up providing for like 10 to 100 different exchanges, like that risk goes up and up over time. And, you'd hope that they'd have some off-chain collection of funds and cold storage that could help cover that risk in that situation, and that they had ample insurance to cover the cost of it. So, yeah, that'll definitely be something very interesting to see play out. I think you also make a really good point about the security controls that implementations have right now. L&D right now has some pretty interesting controls as far as macaroons go. So you can create this credential file and give someone like certain actions, certain access to different actions, like permissions for different actions. So it has gotten quite more granular than, say, the default admin versus read-only versus invoice macaroon. But yeah, there's still a lot of advancement to be made on that front. So see how it shakes out.
I think in addition to that, there's just kind of knowledge asymmetry. Like, I mean, for those of us that have been, operating in Lightning for a couple of years, now we're like just starting to understand what this technology is and how to use it, because like new entrants to the Lightning Network are probably going to experience like, oh, well, I just spent like all of my, routing income on mempool fees. So it's like they're not getting the returns that they're expecting, and it takes so much time to get an understanding of how to operate in this network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a little easier when you're in a low fee environment. It's like we are sort of right now, and we have been in even lower fee environments in the past. But it's going to become immensely more difficult to manage your funds as those on-chain fees to open and close your channels go up. You're going to have to make much more educated decisions. And I think, it's really not straightforward. You're going to have to be data oriented and data driven on what decisions you make. You're going to have to make a lot of adjustments. You're not going to know exactly what your user flows are going to look like every month, but you can sort of ascertain by the data. And, most importantly, it's going to be different for everyone. It's like, I feel like with Bob scores and whatnot, there's been like a real focus on saying, okay, liquidity isn't all the same. There's liquidity that is more valuable from some sources than others. But I think it's also contextual on your economic flows. Like, what does your enterprise or you as an individual, like, where is your money flowing to and from? It's really contextual, and it really will vary case to case.
Well, there's also like the issue of like routing nodes or specialization, right? So I manage the Lightning routing node for Start9's like corporate environment, and like one of the primary cases that we have particularly is last mile routing. But last mile routing comes with like a completely different set of sort of constraints and opportunities than something like a high volume, like I think Bosworth called it a ping pong routing node.
Now, can you rewind real quick and explain what you mean by last mile routing?
Yeah. So in any sort of network topology, your any sender is trying to get their payment from where they are to somewhere far away, right? Mm-hmm. And if you consider yourself like, you're grabbing dinner in a town and your merchant accepts Lightning and you pay Lightning, right? The odds are that you're not going to have a channel directly with that merchant. Not only that, your channels are probably with something that approximates a service provider for yourself, and your merchant probably also has their channels with somebody who approximates a service provider. And so you kind of, even in the most realistic scenario, you should expect this thing to take, a few hops. But this itself can be like recursive, right? That, you could just have like a handful of service providers, which are all strongly connected, which is to say that they're connected. All the service providers are connected to every other service provider, in which case there isn't this notion of a last mile routing node that's different from other ones. But if you don't have that case, which I expect to be the probable case, then you might have nodes that are closer to the end customer and ones that are closer to other service providers. And you can kind of imagine that your payments are escalating from, more local to larger and larger providers, who then take it back to more local places at your destination. Similar to the way that you would try to like catch a flight somewhere, right? You have to drive to the airport. You might take a connecting flight and then drive from the airport to your destination. There's not going to be an airstrip directly on your counterparties, like your payment recipients' doorstep, so to speak.
Yeah, it sounds like DNS to a certain extent to me too. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how these ecosystems pan out. Local routing versus having to go to bigger providers if you're not in, say, that local hub. So
Right, and so what the main point I wanted to make actually is that if you're a Lightning operator, the strategies that you pursue are very strongly dependent on where in the network topology you expect to land, because the strategies that might be conducive to profitability in one location are not at all going to be the same in a different one. Not just in terms of who your specific peers are, but just like what role you're playing in the Lightning Network as a whole.
That's true, and I think you can end up spending so much time on routing and being a node operator that I consciously try to sort of avoid doing that, because you can spend so much time doing it. I really think this is going to be like one of the new roles that come up in the Bitcoin ecosystem. A Lightning operator or a router, basically. Keegan, for you, I mean, probably you've thought of this as well. Probably you might need to hire a full-time, node operator soon.
Yeah, at the moment that hire is myself, but yeah, it's like, yeah, I expect that to be the case. I hope to be able to automate a lot of it with tooling. I mean,
Okay.
I think that Evan was saying something about data. I spend most of my time looking at data and sort of analyzing it to make decisions, and very little time actually changing stuff. And so I think as the tools get better for that, and I expect that those sorts of data tools will be able to be published more widely, because while people can't necessarily help you make better economic decisions for your own sort of place or like your own goals, they can try to give you a better and better like instrumentation in order to be able to make your own decisions. And so I hope as those tools proliferate, that people in general will have to spend less time doing just raw data collection and even some basic analysis.
Yeah, that's definitely my hope with Amboss.Space to be able to make that data, pretty easily understandable, and so that you can make better routing decisions. But it is still a really tricky problem. As far as the last mile goes, the sort of the more centralized services like Loop, and this is kind of centralized in a positive light, just because you have to make less decisions about where to allocate liquidity towards those last miles, when instead I could just open a channel towards Loop, and then that kind of moves the cost over to the retailer to say, oh, I'll have to buy a Loop out, but then I'll have the inbound liquidity that I need, and I can kind of manage that myself. So I'm curious if other services are going to pop up, providing similar services.
Given that some of the liquidity decisions themselves also are like I don't remember who said this, if it was Evan or you, Thomas, but that not all nodes are created equal. And so I actually do expect that in the future, people will start essentially there will be service providers that essentially do retail inbound liquidity. Because right now we have Pool where you can purchase it, but you're purchasing it from some node in tier 1. You have no idea who it is. You have no idea what fees they'll charge you. You pretty much have no idea up front about the deal that you're getting when you're making that purchase decision. And so having kind of recognized service providers who can give you a deal up front that who you're working with, I expect that to happen. And I do believe Nifty Nay, who's on the C Lightning stuff, I was chatting with her over in Miami. I think she's in the audience too. She was talking about how there might be opportunities for nodes to be able to more directly advertise their own inbound liquidity, which I think will solve this problem handily as well.
Yeah, she's working on the liquidity ads. I don't want to speak for her, but yeah, hopefully she'll come up and talk. But it gives you an opportunity to research the counterparty for your channel, which might help mitigate some of those issues where, you might purchase a channel and then realize that on pool, and then realize that it's completely dead liquidity because that's like their only channel, or their other channels are just no good.
Well, I
Now,
think
this
pool
advertising
mitigates
of liquidity, it's just beyond the gossip network? Like, I'd be curious to hear how that works.
Yeah, Lisa, if you
Here
wanna...
she is. She's asking us to talk, so let's get it from the source. Everyone is here for Nifty Nye. Lisa, she's working at Blockstream on Sea Lightning.
Hey, everybody. Sorry.
Hey.
Hey, Evan. Thanks for having me on. This is a really cool space. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the liquidity ads. The basic idea is that it's excuse me, it's an advertisement over the gossip network. So it allows a node to tell any other node on the network who's listening to gossip kind of what their rates are for any liquidity that they have available at the time. There's a few other things that we're gonna add to this like gossip message. I think a few of the things are things that like Rusty, who also works on Sea Lightning, was really adamant about. One of them is like you promise how much liquidity, or you promise what the maximum you'll charge on any payments routed through a channel that you open in response to that liquidity ad. So the idea is that when you like sell someone liquidity through a liquidity offer or liquidity advertisement, you're also going to guarantee them how much it's going to cost for someone to route payments through that channel that you open. So it's basically like the liquidity advertisement like spec protocol that I'm working on right now. Will let you open like channel leases with any peer that's advertising their liquidity at the rate that they stated, and then it gives you a couple guarantees about how they're going to manage that channel. So it's like I haven't used Pool, but I think it's really similar to how Pool works, except that like they mentioned earlier, you'll know exactly who you're connecting with, and I think for now it's only going to be available on Sea Lightning, but it's part of the spec. So any other implementation has like a blueprint of how they can also implement it and also do the same stuff that we're doing, which is cool.
Cool, exciting stuff. Yeah, anything that's going to help improve liquidity or help routers or users of any sort find liquidity are much needed and welcome. So really stoked to hear that you're working on that.
Could I jump in really fast here? Hey, Lisa, would you mind explaining for everybody that point you made yesterday, or I think it was yesterday, about how Liquid, not to bring Liquid into this exactly, but how Liquid is similar to how you kind of model kind of multi-party channels / channel factories?
Yeah, oh man, I really gotta stop tweeting since people want to talk to me about it. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so I tweeted yesterday. So basically, there's this idea I think that I've been hearing some like really smart researchers and devs in Lightning Space talking about how they're excited about like multi-party channels are going to be kind of a way of improving how liquidity in the Lightning network is kind of distributed. So I was like started thinking about it, and like the one thing that kind of occurred to me is how incredibly similar multi-party channels start to become to Liquid. So in some lights, like Liquid is basically a really big multi-party Lightning channel. And I can kind of explain what I mean by that. So I think like in order to understand sort of where that's coming from, I kind of have this definition of what a layer 2 is that I find really useful for understanding like how to compare these different protocols and stuff. So like every layer 2 like protocol or whatever involves kind of two things. Every single one involves locking up some amount of Bitcoin into a multi-sig contract. So in Lightning, these multi-sig contracts are all 2 of 2, right? In Liquid, they use like something called, they have like I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like XO15 or something like that. So basically, so the idea with like any layer 2 thing, right, is you take some Bitcoin and you lock it up into UTXO that's got a multi-sig thing on it, and then that Bitcoin kind of becomes like pooled Bitcoin, right? And then once you've got this pooled Bitcoin, there's a couple different ways that you can like keep track of the accounting of who owns the funds in that like multi-sig UTXO, right? So in Lightning, the way that we keep accounts, so like this is like the accounting system, right? So in Lightning, the accounting system is a signed UTX, it's like a signed transaction. We call them commitment transactions. It's a commitment to what the current channel balance is, right? And both parties have a copy of that commitment transaction that they hold up to. And when the balance in the channel changes, we don't have to make any changes on chain. The two of two multi-party, like not multi-party, sorry, multi-sig UTXO that open the channel stays the same. The only thing that we change is our commitment transactions. So we update our off-chain commitment transactions that we hold. So that's how the accounting for like a Lightning network works, or Lightning channel works. So on Liquid, it's a similar thing. There's like a bunch of Bitcoin locked up into a bunch of UTXOs that are all kind of locked to the exact same multi-sig signature, like script output. And when it goes into Liquid, so what's the method of accounting in Liquid? It's a blockchain, right? So we call it a side chain. It's like a whole separate blockchain. And so whenever any Liquid Bitcoin moves around, you create a new transaction and you send it to this separate blockchain. And then once that transaction gets mined into a block, then that Liquid Bitcoin is considered to have changed hands among all the people that participate in Liquid Bitcoin, right? Okay, so sorry, this is like a long way of getting back to like multi-party channels, but I promise we're getting back there. Okay, so now if we go to multi-party channels, right? And so this is basically, I think my general understanding of the idea is that they're going to change how Lightning works such that now instead of being a two of two multi-sig UTXO that you lock your funds into that opens the channel, instead you'll have like a multi-party, like, or like basically, let's say, I don't know, X of 14, multi-sig UTXO. So that's pretty much exactly like how Liquid's thing is set up, right? But I'm assuming that for multi-party Lightning, multi-party channels, unless you change, I'm assuming the accounting method is going to be the same as current Lightning channels. So what does that mean? Like I mentioned before, the way that we do accounting in Lightning is with signed commitment transactions, right? So I'm assuming that multi-party channels will have the same sign commitment transactions to create state updates. Okay. So then you kind of run into like, if you like keep thinking about this, it's like, okay, so, and I've been asking, I asked Gleb, now Menko, who's working on some of these multi-party channel pool protocols. So like, so I might have this a little wrong, but my understanding is every time you update the state for these multi-party channels, you need to get everyone who is part of that that multi-sig contract. Like let's say there's 14 people in the multi-party channel. My understanding is that you need to get a signature for every single one for every single state update. And this is kind of one of the big challenges, right? So once you've got 14 people that all need to like submit a signature for every state update, all of a sudden you have a consensus problem, right? And this is basically like what my tweets were yesterday. So Liquid, how like consensus problems are like, funnily enough, like one thing that blockchains are really good at solving, right? Like that's kind of one of the reasons that Bitcoin itself is a blockchain is because it solves this consensus problem, which basically fixes the like double spend problem. Anyway, so this is why I was like thinking about it. I was like, well, if you once you get enough people into one of these like multi-party channels, it does start to look a lot like how Liquid works. And you start having like consensus problems, which Liquid is solved by changing the accounting method from signed transactions that everyone has to sign or whatever to a blockchain. And blockchains are really good at again solving this like consensus issue between like a lot of parties. Yeah, so that's kind of.
I had a quick question about kind of what one of the subtler points of what you're talking about, which is that you're saying that the blockchain is really good at solving consensus, but the very different methods between blockchains, Bitcoin and altcoins, etc. The notion of proof of work versus proof of stake versus, in Liquid's case, the federated majority. I don't know exactly what it is, if it's like a 50% majority or a 2/3 majority have to agree. But it seems like those things are actually different in this case, right? Whereas in like Bitcoin, we use proof of work to adjudicate consensus primarily, where the like heaviest chain that still follows the nominal consensus rules is the important one. My question is that in Liquid, I believe, and I could be wrong about this, is that it is the majority of the federation has to agree on a state update.
That's right. Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
So
If
in
that's
Liquid,
the case,
the multi-party channel thing, my understanding of the way that the current protocols are being developed, it's 100%. You need every single party to sign off on every update.
so the biggest question then here is, do you lose the property of being able to unilaterally close the channel?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing, the multi-party channel protocols, again, this is like my sort of hazy understanding, is that they're that's one of the things that they're looking to maintain, is that you can unilaterally withdraw your funds at any time without having to talk to any party, which is a big difference from how Liquid works.
Right. I think that's actually the principal reason why people are okay calling the Bitcoin that's in the Lightning Network Bitcoin, and that there's like a little bit of contention around making the distinction between liquid Bitcoin versus Bitcoin, because the average person doesn't really have the ability to unilaterally pull back to main chain if they decide, for whatever reason, problem or no problem, that they want to.
Yeah, and I think that's totally, I think there's definitely differences between Liquid and Lightning. I think my comparison that I was making in my tweets was really just about like coordination problems. So once you get a bunch of actors into a system, like if you're in a 14-party multi-party channel and one of your peers goes offline, that channel suddenly becomes unusable for anyone in the in that channel, right? Whereas if you have something like Liquid that's got a more kind of consensus-based like ability of these state updates, right? So I guess I'm really just thinking about it from like the state update perspective. Then there's like all these other associated things with like how do you withdraw your funds, et cetera, that like both of them have different solutions for. But yeah, no, you're totally right.
I think it was very interesting. Like, sorry to cut you off there, Ellie, but the reason that I found it kind of your tweets kind of interesting, because I was talking to someone the other day about kind of just channel factories, and I realized a lot of these kind of thought processes haven't really, at least maybe on the pleb side of things, where I exist, or whatever, but where these channel factories, like the kind of how things would work out. Like if I was to actually do these things, would it be with like, hey, Evan, how about everyone in like that's a speaker right now open a multi-party channel? Because like I think that's the level of trust and thought process that you basically need to have here. And I think I'm not sure if it's an unknown thing, but people kind of question Liquid as a useful thing. I'm not going to go into that here, but I personally don't care about Liquid that much compared to Lightning. I find Lightning much more interesting. And so when I look at multi-party channels, basically appearing to be a federation or something similar, it gets a lot less fun sounding. So I think it was just important to kind of start bringing it up as we get a lot closer to possibly having those things, with any prep out coming hopefully sometime this year.
Yeah. So I think rewinding back to what Nifty Nay was explaining about the multi-party channels, right? I think with Liquid, when you peg into Liquid, you basically lock your Bitcoins, isn't it? So when you peg in, I think it can very much be imagined like you're going into a channel with a large number of parties, but the peg out is different here. So that being federated, right? I think somebody had a question how many signatures it needs. It's actually it's a 11 of 15 multi-sig, and the signatures are done in a round robin fashion. So the minute it gets 11 signatures, the funds are released, and it's supposed to be all automatic. The node controls all that. However, when the peg-in happens, the address doing the peg-in is whitelisted. So the peg out can only happen to one of those addresses, which is fine, but it's all supposed to be automatic. And I think the way it has been structured is these federated multi-sig holders, right, individual signatories, they're distributed in various fashions, and they're also distributed geographically as well. So it is going to be very difficult for anybody to coordinate a global sort of malicious activity on a global scale to be able to sort of convince so many different disparate parties to come together and to collude. So that is, I think that is.
Especially as some of these like multi-party channel things proliferate, right? Like it's kind
Absolutely.
of, I like Liquid. You could kind of make the argument that like G20 state actors could try to go and coerce Liquid itself, but if there's like 20 liquids, like I don't know if that's becomes feasible at that point.
Yeah,
I don't think it's helpful or accurate to consider it like opening a channel on Lightning, unless you also consider like Coinbase kind of like opening a channel on Lightning.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I think it is a bit nuanced, and I think it's better not to sort of state it that way, in order not to confuse everybody. And I think what Liquid have done is they've used consensus, as Nifty Nate was I think trying to say. They've used consensus to sort of go about updating the state. If at all we want to call it that. So with the 1 minute blocks, with the Elements blockchain that they have, every 1 minute they sort of do the signatures with all the signatories, and then they update the state based on that. So they've gone ahead with a blockchain mechanism because they're very good at consensus. However, in Liquid, we've gone with these pre-signed transactions which you don't broadcast, sort of to maintain the state. And then you've got RGB, which have gone with merge mining to sort of update the state. Yeah.
I think that the pre-signed transactions, though, give you an important property here. It's not just about how the state is maintained, because I think the most important part of those commitment transactions is the unilateral close feature. And I think what I can't, like, one of the other speakers was saying, sorry, I don't know your name, Crown. You were saying that like you don't think that Liquid is like the same.
Right. Did you cut out, or did my internet go out?
I think you cut out. So, folks, I want to say this has been an amazing discussion so far. Unfortunately, I'm running a little low on time today, so let's do another 15 minutes before I have to split. So if anyone else wants to hop on stage, ask any of the speakers any questions, now would be the time to do so. So just throw a request in, and I'll bring you on board. Yeah, we could take it wherever you want. But hey, Suheb, how's it going? We got Suheb from the Ride the Lightning project. Incredible way to manage your own node from your web browser. Use it all the time. It's a really incredible product, and you worked with like L&D, NC Lightning, which is a huge plus.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime, bro.
Yeah. I had a question for Lisa, Nifty, right? And I want to kind of go back to the liquidity advertisement on the Gossip Network. I was just curious in terms of the advertisement that we are placing on the network. What are we going to advertise in terms of the cost of routing the channel? Are we going to advertise the rate that we are going to charge on the routing?
Yeah, so the spec as it stands right now, there's a draft PR up for it, which I can post. There's 5 pieces of information that we're adding to the node announcement. 2 of those pieces of information are basically a rate that you're going to charge the peer for the liquidity. So one of them is a basis. So that's the basis that you're going to charge for them. And the other is a flat base rate of Satoshis. It's a lot like how the channel fees work right now. The 3rd piece of information is a weight number. So this would be so when you open a channel, basically since the other side is going to be putting UTXOs into the channel open on your behalf, basically, we need a way to pass that cost over to the opener. So this 3rd piece of information in the node announcement is the weight that they're going to charge you for their inputs. And it's meant to be kind of fixed. So you just kind of pick what, I don't know, 2 inputs and an output would be on average. And just so every time someone opens it with you, you charge them that same weight. The opener chooses what the fee rate is. So when you're looking at the liquidity advertisement, you have a good idea of, you'll be able to calculate kind of ahead of time what that's going to be based on whatever fee rate you pick. And then the last two pieces of information are, like I was talking about previously, they're basically a promise as to what the maximum you would charge for the channel fee to route through that to use that liquidity that you're basically like leasing to the other the other party. And that maps exactly to the fee rates that already exist. One of them is like the channel base MSAT, and the other is basically a part per million maximum. So those are maxes. You say like, I won't charge more than like 1,000 base MSATs, and then like, I don't know, 2,000 parts per million for any funds routed through this. And then part of the protocol, like part of the open protocol, we've added it such that the person who's leasing the fund signs a commitment to that to those numbers, and then you can prove if they don't keep their promise. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, so there are two components. One is the upfront charge for opening up the channel, which is basically compensating the opener for the mining fees, right? And then the other is a regular fee rate that you're going to charge when the transactions are going to go through that channel.
No, there's like kind of three parts to it. One is how much you're paying for the actual funds that are being leased to you. So basically the rate for the capital. The second one is that funding weight, so the amount that you're paying them in exchange for the fees to open the channel. And then the third one is a commitment to how much you will charge for other people to use that liquidity that you're leasing. So that's like the channel fee part.
Got it. Okay, good. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. Please forgive some of my ignorance. I've got an Umbral node and whatnot, but I'd kind of like to, ramp up and, get more involved in Lightning, start to look into, development on it and whatnot. Is there anything that you would recommend, for me to start, which rabbit hole should I be going down?
As far as a user or as far as development?
Well, both. I want to use it and I want to develop on it.
Yeah, sure thing. So as a user, I think where a lot of the fun is happening is on Telegram, on a channel called PlebNet. This is where plebs are getting together and figuring out how to give each other liquidity. They're doing this thing called rings where a list of plebs are set up in order and everyone has a channel open to them. And they open a channel to the next person in the ring, and then they rebalance so they can go both ways. It's really an incredible community-driven liquidity solution, and I think something similar is going to pop up for watchtowers so people don't get, cheated. So that's going to be really cool. I'd say that's a really good place to start with that. There's a whole bunch of actual Lightning Network channels on Telegram too. So feel free to shoot me a DM, and I'll send you links to that. As far as development goes, obviously all the big projects are still undergoing protocol changes, like Lisa was talking about. She's doing, the leases and advertising the rates for liquidity, which is really awesome. There's all sorts of innovations going on that level. You might want to check out LND if you're into Golang, C Lightning if you code in C. But there's also countless applications that you can work on that need help. Justifer's Amboss is sort of like a Lightning node explorer for the web that really could use a couple of more hands on it, I think. That's an really awesome project. Really happy to help that. As far as wallets, I could always use more help.
Sorry, what was the name of that again?
I'm Evan Kaloudis.
No, I'm sorry. I know your name. I mean the project, the Explorer.
Oh yeah, sure. It's called Amboss. Amboss.Space, I believe. Amboss.Space on the web, and it is incredible. It's got the best UI as far as these explorers go so far, and I'm really excited. The two guys running it are incredible. We had Jessifer talking today. We also got Tony, Anthony Pontevin. He's also the developer of Thunderhub, which is another solution for managing your node on the web. I believe it's tied into Umbrel, so you should definitely check that out. So yeah, that's another project that could use help, probably. I'm sure Suhab could also use some help over at RTL. They're an Angular web app, whereas Thunderhub's on React. We over at Zeus are also looking for open source contributors. If you're into React and React Native, we've got a whole bunch of stuff coming out with our new redesign. Yeah, I mean, just shoot me a DM if you want to talk about, what languages you're familiar with, and there's no shortage of projects that could use extra hands. And it's really about the open source community giving back and trying to help each other out. That really makes the space so special. So would really love to help you out and point you in the right direction there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'll definitely DM you.
Great. All right, guys, we got in about another 8 minutes before I got to split and hit the road. Does anyone else have any other questions? It could be, on protocol stuff, on application stuff, on getting liquidity, anything relating to Lightning Network. This is the place to ask.
Just want to say real quick, the URL for plebnet is kycjelly.net.
Yeah, that's correct. Shouts to JC Crown, product evangelist over at Zebedee. Hope you're doing well, JC. Thanks for that tidbit. But yeah, I'm a really big fan of what they're doing at plebnet. It seems to be like a really tight-knit community. Obviously, as you could tell from that URL, they have a really good sense of humor. They make a lot of jokes about girthy channels, so hopefully that sort of humor doesn't bother you. I think it's a plus. But yeah, definitely a good place to get started and to get your node connected with some good liquidity so you can get those payments coming in and out of your node. So that's great. Anyone else want to chime in? I mean, this has been an incredible discussion. I'm so happy we had so many people chime in. Lisa gave us a really good breakdown of what she's working on, and the multi-party coordination stuff that these layer 2 protocols are bringing to the table. Chaz, did you want to add anything?
I was going to say it's time for you to explain any prev out, L2, and everything it would allow in the next 6 minutes here.
Yeah, so any prev out, which we should probably do like a whole ep on, perhaps.
Right.
Maybe we'll go on Lightning Junkies. So for those who don't know, Chaz, our co-host here, he runs an incredible podcast about the Lightning Network and its development. It's called Lightning Junkies. He has incredible hosts on, and I think he is a great host, asking great questions. So for anyone who wants to learn more about the Lightning Network, go check it out. I think it's lightningjunkies.net, right?
That's correct. Next episode's going to be Ruben Thompson breaking down blind state chains and any prev out in L2 technically. So that's already there. Excellent.
Okay, so definitely check that out. So guys, I'm going to ask the speakers, if you don't have any more questions, to please try to step down if you can. I think we have all the speaker spots filled out. And we've got a pleb in my DMs, BTC BAP. I'm reading your DM. He's trying to get on stage. Let's have him ask a question before we call it. Let me see if I could find him in here. Unfortunately, Twitter Spaces has a couple more bugs that need to be ironed out. But let's see if we get him on stage. Let's see. So BTC BAP, if you're listening and we can't get you on stage, we will have you ask the first questions for the next session. Yeah, it's not letting me go to see the full list of listeners, so I don't even know how we can make that happen, unfortunately. So BTC BAP, you might be out of luck, bro. Sorry. Anyone else have any other questions before we wrap this up? This has been a great session. I think we're also going to try to... Oh, he's just asking me via DM. Brilliant, BTC BAP. My question is, how will node clusters work? So I think this is regarding LND's 0.13's redundancy features. And basically, I think the nodes are going to be spun up in clusters, right? They're all going to have the same identity in this mode. Perhaps they add another mode where you have multiple IDs, but I think this makes most sense when they're all sharing one. And from my understanding, the node clusters run in this pod and only one is active at a time. They're all just sharing their state with each other, so it knows what the balance is between the four. And as it works, in my understanding, there's only one head node that coordinates everything, and then one of the, let's say, four in your pod is active at a time, and the other three are inactive. And the head node is checking in with the active node at all times, and as soon as it becomes unresponsive, it says, okay, you sit down. It makes sure that that node that's being problematic can't step out of line, speak up, and one of the passive nodes becomes the new active node. And in that case, hopefully, if, let's say L&D has a bug or there's a memory issue or something, you could resume operations. So if you're a big enterprise or a big routing node, any one of those issues won't be a showstopper. Of course, I haven't gone hands-on with version 0.13 yet, but hopefully this week. And be really looking forward to talking about my experience with it next Lightning Friday. So that's the plan, folks. We're going to be doing this every week. We're going to go, an hour, maybe two this week. I got to split off a little early, unfortunately. But yeah, we're going to try to make this a regular thing. Tell people about it. Use the Lightning Friday hashtag. And I think Jesper's also recording it, so he can talk about. We'll figure that out. Maybe we'll do an RSS feed or YouTube, but we're definitely going to make this a regular thing. So I got one more person who's trying to come on stage. Oh, it's my buddy Maxwell Sikorsky. So this will probably be the last question before I got to split. Max, are you on stage with us, buddy?
Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for doing this. Glad I reminded you to host it again. We do it every Friday, whatever time you guys want. But definitely we'll be here, and if we can record them or something like that, like you said, do an RSS feed or throw them up on YouTube or whatever you want. Yeah, let's do that. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Max, for giving us a nice swift kick in the ass to start doing this. We had a lot of fun last week answering all sorts of questions. I wish it went a little longer, but we had some technical difficulties. It's going to be a little bit of trial and error. The platform's still a little shaky, and we got to figure out exactly what a recording flow is. But yeah, I want to thank Max. I want to thank Chaz. I want to thank Ali. Lisa for giving such a great detailed explanation of what she's working on. Each and every one of you for joining the discussion today, and all of you working on the Lightning Network, working to make it better. Really appreciate you. So with that said, I think we're going to call it there and say this has been a really successful Lightning Friday. Make sure you follow all the co-hosts, and we'll see you next week. Cheers, all.
See you on the Lightning Network.
See ya on the Lightning Network. There we go. All right. Peace, all. Have a good weekend.